welcome to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn, a podcast where we brainstorm the science and philosophy of a new age, an electric universe age, and what it means for the human race, past, present, and future. I'm Finn, author, manual laborer, and sure, I'm not the brains of the electric universe, but I play a valuable role. I matter. Don't ignore me.
And I'm Sparks, physicist, electrical experimentalist, and someone who passes time shaping grand canyons and majestic mountain ranges. Only very tiny.
Today we welcome back the legendary Andrew Hall, a modern-day Nikola Tesla, whose revolutionary work will one day rewrite geology, when everyone suddenly becomes open to rational ideas that make sense. Should be any day now. Well, maybe the Morlocks will tunnel across one of his books someday and figure it out. And finally, welcome back the cathartic corsair himself, Robert Hawthorne. A sailor and scientist with an itchy trigger finger and a critically low tolerance for lamestream shenanigans.
So once you go from the 10-dimensional world of strings, where these dimensions are very tiny, and go to an 11 dimension, then you're talking about a whole new picture. A picture whereby some of these dimensions could be huge. And that may even explain why gravity is so weak. Gravity is a very weak force. Perhaps gravity oozes, escapes into these higher dimensions, and that's why gravity is so weak.
You son of a bitch! Today's springboard topic, Miyake events, and how Robert will teach us all how to tell time by incinerating the ionosphere and then chopping down some trees. Now sit back, and let's see where this one goes. Welcome back to the Brainstorm, everybody.
Hello, welcome back.
So today we've got Andy on and Robert Hawthorne and Andy Hall, and we're going to be discussing some plasma storm activity and Miyake events that are helping us understand how to date world events more precisely. So, Robert, your paper about Miyake events.
Yes.
Give us an overview about it and tell us what's going on there.
All right. So the overview is it's just a culmination of my work over the past few years where I started delving into the idea that a Miyake event not only could have induced telluric currents to form a Upheaval Dome, but actually energized and possibly could have caused the polar configuration to break up, or was when the event happened, it was during a time of maybe possibly twin comets, where it could explain a lot of the master of animals motifs that we see, how that affected the aurora at the same time. Gotcha. So just recently, I was just, like I said, with Andy's recent video about the fraud in the scientific community, I wanted to just really just challenge like the peer review system.
Yeah.
And just that term alone, after what Sabine Hossenfelder wrote in that video where she quoted that one scientist, his one quote alone basically challenges why the relevance of peer review to begin with, because he admitted that science is now in its own bubble, which means they're no longer peers. They've isolated themselves. Mm-hmm. And that since there's so much fraud rampant in the system and they can't clear it out as fast as it's coming in, it's doomed to fail. So therefore, they don't deserve the right. They've lost their integrity to review. So that's
the Sabine stuff was wild. I just sent Ben a little video yesterday of Hawking. I don't want to get sued, but
right.
And this is before they had his computer, and he's kind of mumbling, and he's got a translator right there who's supposedly translating him. But I've often suspected that the CIA just had some poor guy in a chair and they were just telling us whatever they wanted us to hear.
Yeah, right. So what I was just trying to do was challenge the whole system of peer review, and I just wanted to jump into Google Gemini AI to assist me to write another paper, and then it told me that it won't write a paper for you. So then I just started going through the ideas of my challenging of the Miyake events, and just ideas of telluric currents, induction, capacitance, and how would that interaction go down during a Miyake event as that shock wave or the CME is passing by the Earth. Depending on if it's even in the shock wave to begin with. It could be somewhere else in the solar system and just takes it up during time as it works around. But we'll get into that information later. But however,
What's
But
a Miyake event exactly?
so a Miyake event, I was going to do that. We were going to cover that. So Miyake events are just recently discovered by Dr. Fusa Miyake, who's a dendrochronologist, and what she noticed was spikes of carbon-14 in the ancient tree ring record.
Okay.
And then they also noticed that
So
when you
there's spikes
correlate
of
these,
carbon-14 in ancient tree rings. That's what a
yes,
Miyake event is.
no, this is part of the supporting evidence. Okay, so what a Miyake
No,
event?
just what is it? What is a Miyake event?
It's a solar energetic proton or particle event. SEPs they're sometimes called solar proton events, but they're not always protons. They sometimes have electrons. So there's a differentiation. Solar electron particle event, SEPs, because sometimes when ionized matter gets charged out, there's free electrons separated, true neutrals. So there's a difference, and not just protons, right?
So what's
And when
the
you have a
difference
high
between
energetic
that
state
and
of
a
that,
corona mass ejection?
Yeah,
yes,
that.
and all that material, right? When you have such a high energetic level, when you can get actually chemistry going on where you can get isotopes in the ice cores like beryllium 10, chlorine 36, when you can get those kinds of isotopes made with those energy levels, that's when they dedicate that kind of matching with the carbon 14 spikes. That is what dictates a Miyake event, which is what's separated from the Carrington event. And when they get that kind of energy levels to do those kinds of isotopes, we're talking on like possibly orders of magnitude stronger than the Carrington event. Okay.
So
So
a Miyake event is just the same thing as a CME. It's just a lot stronger.
Basically, and how much material was actually absorbed into the core, because that's how they track it. What was actually absorbed in the organic material as far back as they can go, because the tree ring record only goes back so far. They match it to the ice cores, which can go back even further. And when they can get that kind of like double verification at that level, that's when they can verify a Miyake event. Because the Carrington event, as we know, as powerful as it was a geomagnetic storm, and it did put out some carbon 14, but it didn't put out a big spike in the ice core record. So that's where
why does it put out carbon 14?
that I didn't get into. I didn't really get into that part, so I can't explain that. I'm sure somebody else could explain that, but there's all kinds
Andy,
of
I bet Andy's got some guesses. Why would a Miyake event produce carbon 14, Andy?
Well, the energy coming in is going to accelerate the radiation and change the carbon 14 isotope ratios, and because it'll start degrading, it'll reduce the, what am I trying to say here? It'll increase the radiation, right? In turn, I don't know the exact elemental, but it turns carbon 14 to carbon 12, and then you get a ratio between, or whatever it is. I'm not sure the exact specifics of it.
Oh, I see. So you'll find
Look at
more of that.
ratio and see that something happened uh, to cause that radiation event, and change carbon 14 to whatever it changes to when
Right.
that.
I see. So you're on the Earth.
And
You're
then, the more energy you have, the more it will affect other elements, like
Right.
whatever you were, beryllium or whatever you mentioned there, Robert. Those then take higher levels of energy to get for the radiation to affect them, and
Exactly.
and so that then it was a stronger event.
Right. Yes,
And it
and I
makes
think,
sense.
and they can actually date on how long the actual storm actually lasted, because by the intensity of the concentration of the C14, they can see how intense it was. But for how many rings that throughout that spike lasted, that's how they can see how long a storm actually lasted. And it shows that chart that I showed in my last video. There was one that was mentioned, and there was the 5410 BCE event, and that one the radiation spike lasted for up to 1 to 2 years almost. So that would have been a storm to endure.
So we can carbon date these tree rings. However, carbon dating isn't particularly accurate. But now you mentioned that you can actually cross-reference the events with cultural pottery. So like one year you've got no designs on the pottery, and then the following year you're seeing these plasma instability figures drawn on all the ancient artwork. And this is correlating in multiple societies around the world, like basically on the same year.
Right. So then, when in regards to the pottery, that was my idea when I mentioned the three-legged crow event, and
Yeah.
this is where I got into the idea of the Miyake events, because I looked into the three-legged crow. It looked like a big, and when Neil Thompson was talking about this in the Electric View, Andy, a long time ago, and I started looking into that, and I started looking at the imagery of the three-legged crow, and it always looked like a giant sun with a big sunspot in it, which looked like a Rorschach test, resembled a bird with three legs. And but then it was the Korean version of it, where they have a stone totem outside of an emperor's tomb, where they have the same solar disk, but there's this weird energetic orange halo around it, and it's completely around the stone. And that's when it told me that it was like, this has to be a solar flare, and it had to be Earth directed, or at least, and they saw it. So then I was looking for evidence of, because if during this kind of an energetic event, everybody, even Dr. Tamitha Skov told me that the intensity and the radiation would be so blinding you wouldn't be able to see it. So how did the ancestors actually testify that they did? Like a example of the Hexi corridor, they actually have a legend there where the ancients saw sunspots, thought it was a crow, and they drew the imagery on their temple. Go ahead.
So we're thinking.
Go ahead, Ben.
So we're thinking that the Miyake event was a very, very large solar flare coming out of sunspots that were in the shape of a three-legged crow.
Right. And that's where I started looking up the idea of it, because, Dr. Carrington, when he was observing the Carrington event, he was observing the sun and noticed a sunspot in it and drew the size of it. So basically I was correlating in our last video, or my one before that basically the ancient Chinese and Dr. Carrington did the same thing, except they just wrote it on their shrines and temples. He wrote it through his documentation. So I started looking at the idea of the intensity of sunspots and their size. Does that correlate to the intensity of the strength of the solar flare? And that's when I came into the idea of the document of the 400 different stars that were similar to our star, but they were they were actually known as super flare. And for the longest time, science has always said that our star is relatively calm, so there's nothing to worry about. However, with these known Miyake events now, they realize that these super flares are basically contingent to the same energy levels of the super flares of the other stars. Therefore, our star is quite, is capable of pulling out some serious energetic events. Now, to get to the pottery, they just recently discovered, and they call this the global anchor, because in Despilio, Greece, they found a wooden tablet, because they had their culture there was like raised, huts on swampy land. So they had these wooden pillars, and they found some, and this particular piece of wood had all these weird engravings on it. And I hopefully, Andy, you got to see that image when I sent it to you. But there's some weird engravings on the wooden tablet. And when they did the carbon-14 dating, they matched it to the 5259 BCE event. And that's also one of the three events that I mentioned in my trinity of, the ones that were right prior to the dawn of civilization, which was why I thought it was, these things have to do with somewhat all the creation stories, right?
Right.
So when they actually call it now an absolute dating of a Miyake event to the 5259 BCE event to an actual civilization in Greece at that time. They call that the global anchor, because now you're actually having archaeological finding of carbon-14 dendrochronology when they have matched it to the ice cores as well, right?
Nice.
So they call that the golden anchor now, or the global anchor for archaeology, anthropology, and those kinds of methods, dating methods.
I see. So here's a question. If we're getting hit with an intense CME type event that might cause a Miyake event, is it reasonable to think that might raise mist on the Earth?
It's possible. I mean, you would get all kinds of weird chemistry going on in the atmosphere, and since all those protons are coming in, we got oxygen. You can get a lot of water.
I mean, clouds are basically just water vapor stuck to electric current, aren't they?
And I've seen images. I can't really correlate it, but I have a good hunch that if you're looking at storms like during a solar flare, and if you watch like the hurricanes and stuff, you can see the lightning start to pick up and the clouds get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's always after the lightning strikes do the clouds get bigger. So I think it's like the cosmic rays are coming in, creating some kind of energetic event, which is demonstrated through the lightning. And then you're getting water expansion in the clouds, which is why you get the density and the volume increase in the clouds. That's my my theory, just from watching it. I have no proof on this at all.
Yeah, my thought was that if the extra charge might cause mist, maybe that's why they could see the three-eyed crow so clearly, because when you can see the sunspots through a thick fog, it looks like to me.
Yes, and or during these, I was going to get into the idea of intense solar flares are known to create red aurora. We just saw one back in November. I sent the pictures to you, Ben, especially around my area, and there was an intense red aurora in the sky.
Yeah, we saw that.
And I was thinking, well, then that would actually act like, sunglasses, wouldn't it? If it would have actually occupied the entire sky down to the equator, like they said it would have, that would have been intended one giant red lens to look through as a filter, and then you could see it like a giant red disc in the sky with a black spot in it, and that's exactly what they
described. Yeah.
So that's
Andy, if you were having an intense solar storm like this, like what kind of stuff would people down on the Earth see in the sky?
Well, I think it does stimulate cloud formation. I think that happens. I don't have any proof of that or anything, but I've noticed that on high solar, especially, high solar output days, that often there's it'll form a high cloud cover, a high thin cloud cover, in fact, which might be just the kind of thing that would make the sun more observable. But there's another comment I want to make, because, whoever the expert was you mentioned earlier says that, back in the day, they wouldn't have been able to look at the sun because it would have been so bright. It's typical that they ignore how sophisticated they might have been. I mean, the ancients were expert astronomers.
That's what I believed. Yeah.
That's what they did, is build megalithic, observatories and watch the sky. And so
I agree.
The idea that they couldn't figure out a way to take a sheet of mica or colored glass or something like that to be able to look.
Right.
That's a very good answer, Andy. I'm like, maybe they use the fog. Yeah, they weren't idiots. We always forget.
They were not technical dummies.
No.
And, think of the work Jeffrey Drum's doing to show the sophistication of the systems and processes that they were using. So anyway, that's just a comment I wanted to make,
And that's totally valid. But I was just trying to focus on like completely natural items, so that way I couldn't like drum up some kind of invention of a technological device that depended on that. It's like what could naturally happen that could have explained why they could see the event. And
that's exactly it. I think a natural sheet of mica would serve the purpose.
Yeah, that's true. But I never thought of that. Was all I was saying. But
what are you doing with the CD, man?
So when you were talking about clouds, I was sent this, and I do not remember who sent it to me. But this is a study. This is a DVD of a Russian study of cloud formation. And it's directly linked to Birkeland currents and incoming particle fluxes.
Nice.
They have shown a 1-to-1 correlation of when you have incoming ionized particles, it creates clouds at certain levels.
And you can see it, the double layers, the filaments. I mean, it's so clear. Once Andy first mentioned that, I can't even look at the clouds anymore the same. It's you can just see the current.
Right. Oh yeah, you can see it. It's the electric field that's displaying itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some beautiful clouds here because we've had this storm front that moved through in San Diego, and there were all these high clouds as the front came through, these high cirrus clouds with interference patterns all over the place, and it looked so cool. I didn't have my camera ready though, but
it never does it justice anyway, though.
Yeah, right.
So would I be fair in saying that a Miyake event is so powerful that it would blow off the Earth's magnetosphere temporarily? Is that
that's an interesting event, because when I was thinking about what Andy's talked about in his Eye of the Storm series, I actually sent him a link on the AI conversation I had with that, because I was trying to think that with he had mentioned that there was something that happened right at the end of the Younger Dryas in his last video. And I come to learn when I was looking through my Miyake event research that the largest and the most strongest Miyake event ever recorded now was at the end of the Younger Dryas at the year 12,350 BCE. So that's why I sent this information to him and saying that, you know, these Miyake events, there's so many of them, and right now that they're matching, and and my theory actually revolves around, well, do these actually match up with like mythologies, creations, lores, and any kind of like archaeological evidence for the civilizations that lived there at that time? And that's where I fell right into the Dispilio tablet, where they actually did just that. And then I used that same methodology based on my idea of the three-legged crow and applied it to the Yang Shao culture of the Chinese, where we got into that pottery stuff. Because the pottery there actually shows like the sunbird, the sun motif, and all that stuff. However, the culture that's in between that one and the 660 BCE event, which I'm going to get into, there's a lapse, right? And the pottery that's from the culture that's in between there is just plain gray, maybe with a black band. That's it. It's dull, you know.
Right.
There's so much elaborate artistic, you know, integrity in the first generation, with where the Miyake event supposedly happened at 5259 BCE, 5410 BCE, and then there was another C14 excursion 70 years prior to that at 5480 BCE. So that trilogy right there is where I thought, you know, that had to, you know, if everybody survived and lived through that, there's got to be some kind of recording, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where I got into the Yang Shao culture. Thought maybe that culture matched the 5410 because of the range of the year. You know, how that lasted for so long. I thought for sure everybody saw that for sure, and that would be the time when they started the recordings. But
that seemed to make sense. But for the smooth brains like me, Andy,
smooth brains,
what would cause people to draw these pictures on pottery during one of these events? What are they seeing in the sky?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I haven't studied this, and I'm listening to Robert. I think he's, but I don't. I mean, I would imagine that the aurora would appear and
exactly
probably trace back some of the religious experiences and visions that were reported. And but I haven't sat down and tried to correlate any of those things or anything like that.
Well, I did. That's my research.
That's why we're listening to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I matched. That was my idea. The theory that I matched it to the 5259 event in China, right? And I through the AI research, they actually said that there's actually a testable, predictable method to this one. There are clay amphras where they had either oil or wine residue at the base of these amphras because they were conical shaped. And if they can get the residues and test that material and match the carbon-14 to that event, that would be the confirmation to that event. And that would be a cross-reference across the globe, specifically at that time, which would be revolutionary for archaeology, to be able to match any other culture, you know, at that time around that world. They could say if they interacted with each other or they're, you know, they can figure out so many other things.
So you just need to fly over and get a sample of some of that grape juice and see how old it is.
No, I'm just offering the prediction. I don't have the funding for that, and I'm trying to poor boy this thing the whole way because, like I said, I'm challenging peer review. And
well, it's the age of the internet. Maybe you can Google someone over there,
right? So, and then through my research of the three-legged crow, because I understood that there was a counterpart for each culture: the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese. But the Chinese was, like I said, the first one in 5259 BCE. But I learned that the Korean and the Japanese were far later down the road, closer to our time. And then I started learning more of the, like I said, Miyake events. And like we said, addressed Andes at the end of the Younger Dryas. And there's also the one at the Le Champ event, which would address your issue of the compressed magnetic field, because it was supposedly at that time, it was about 4 to 10% the strength of it, what it is now normally. So a Miyake event, even a Carrington event at that time, would have caused disastrous, you know, plasma disruptions from coupling of the telluric currents and the outside, you know, plasma, because the magnetic shield was so weakened.
Okay, here's a question. So we've got at least three. You have identified 3 different Miyake events over the ages. Was the Carrington event one of them?
So it was not a Miyake event, but it was definitely a solar storm. And they try to, and I know that, like I said, the difference between the Miyake event was the geomagnetic storm. Yes, it caused a lot of damage to telegraph wires and stuff, but it didn't produce the intense chemistry to match in the ice core levels, which is why they don't consider it a Miyake level event. But then part of my theory was, like I said, it really doesn't matter, because there could be historical events recorded for even very weak solar flares. And that's when I got into the 1561 and the 1566 events in Nuremberg, Germany, and then 5 years later in Basel, Switzerland, respectively, where they had, I had theorized that basically I know that there were solar flares that year. I found a research paper that they dated back about 400 years of solar flares and went right back to literally the year of 1561. So
this goes back to something that Matt asked a few minutes ago. Do we have anything to fear from Miyake events? And the answer looks unequivocally to be no.
If you want to fear something, like, I know Randy likes to make references to the Bible, because I mean, all the religions make, references to these events, because my theory is that they do revolve. A lot of them do revolve around solar events, intense ones. And my biblical reference, because I believe in Christianity, I acknowledge Christ as my Lord and Savior. So I believe in Revelation, and anybody that recognizes Revelation 6:12, the opening of the sixth seal, matches a Miyake level event. Black sun, black as sackcloth of hair, a great intense earthquake, fires, all that stuff, and mayhem, and chaos. So I think
Revelations are certainly creeping me out these days.
Yeah,
I've never been much of an inheritor, but I don't know. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now.
So that's another prediction I can say, that Revelation 6:12 is a reference to a Miyake event, and that I actually did an idea of that actually at a church, priesthood sermon I did when I went to church one day or a couple years ago.
So now I'm getting two different answers to this. Should we fear Miyake events? Yes or no?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Because I'm seeing the data says exactly not. It's just
humanity will survive, but it depends on the intensity of them, right? It depends on the intensity of them. It depends on the location of the Earth when the CME is ejected. So do we take on a direct hit, or is it a glancing blow, or do we just take on the radiation as we're going through the solar system, and it travels around in the heliopause?
But have we established that a CME is the same thing as a Miyake event? Have we established that?
Well, they established whenever they know that Miyake events now are from solar flares. They're not just cosmic rays, because
a solar flare is not the same thing as a CME. Those are very different things.
Because the CME is actually ejected from the solar flare, because you see how the solar flares sometimes don't have CMEs. I understand that. But when the CME is ejected, because it's always that charged material, right? It's that energetic creation, or the chemistry that mixes with our atmosphere, gets absorbed, that actually matches the C14 spikes. When you can get that energetic event, that's what they use as the dictating factor to justify a Miyake event, or just a strong Carrington level event, or even something weaker, which is what my theory was I was getting to, are those Nuremberg and Basel, Switzerland events, because there were solar flares that year, and it was right during the same time of a day-night differential, like Andy likes to talk about with the charge, from going into dawn and dusk. And both of these events happened right around that time during a meteor shower. So that whole combination of things could have adjusted why those objects were, illuminated, arguing or dancing around in the sky, and then as they fell to the earth, caught everything on fire. And it wasn't.
Ben, what's the difference between a solar mass ejection and like a Carrington event in the electric universe?
Well, like we've always watched in the Carrington event, it was definitely an intense solar flare. It caused aurora basically down to the Caribbean area. It caused telegraph wires to catch on fire. So it definitely caused a lot of electromagnetic pulse damage to any of our technology. And a Miyake event, since it's orders of magnitude stronger, it would destroy our satellite network. It would pretty much collapse even our grid network underneath ground could catch on fire.
It sounds like it's dangerous.
It'd blow the it blows the transformers in the
definitely does, but right. I'm sure, because all the copper wiring is going to have an eddy effect, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Ben,
Hi.
What is the difference from the electric universe point of view about what's happening on the sun between these events?
So, night and day is the quick answer, because on the sun, the standard model is that we're just looking at a nuclear furnace. And like any furnace and like any thing that's burning, like say this is a log and it's on fire, it just burns. And then as it reduces, it just gets smaller and smaller. And that's exactly what we don't see with the sun. All of a
Right.
sudden we get these hiccup, burps. What the hell? What is causing that? Because the solar flare is essential, and I still don't have a 100% idea on this. Andy, maybe you can weigh in on this. A solar flare is essentially an explosion on the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does it always throw out matter? No, it doesn't. We can have flares without CMEs, and the CMEs happen after the flare. So you get the flare event and then the CME. So from the electric universe point of view, we have of what's going on with the sun, we have an electrical discharge event, which we call the sun. And as most of us know who pay attention to how electricity flows through wires, it's not consistent at all. We have brownouts, we have blackouts, we have surges. That's why everyone owns a surge protector, to protect against those transient things. Why does this happen? And Andy can probably talk about this a little better than I can. But from my understanding is that when the grid, the collection of all of the motors spinning, producing energy into the grid, some of them stop, some of them start, some of them stop, some of them start, depending on the need. Every time a new motor or a new power station stops and starts, there's a push, there's a flux, there's a pulse that goes into the system. And it looks like that's what's going on with our sun. Where does it come from? Not
the rest of the circuit.
Sure. The rest of the circuit, which, as we know in the electric universe, is the size of the universe, which is awesome. So you've got all these pulses going here, there, and everywhere, and all of a sudden the sun gets a pulse and goes bleh, and flash and bleh, and flash.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. But it's cyclical too, which what would explain that? Galaxy rotation, maybe?
I'm not sure that it is.
If I'm on that one, because in response to Miyake events, they haven't really traced that to any kind of cycle yet. And they don't understand what causes them, what would, if there is even a cycle to them to even begin with. They're just a complete like anomaly as to why they happen.
Right,
and
just some blip out in space.
I couldn't even, and since I understood that, I wasn't even going to try to theorize this to go down that road, because then that would be like two theories at the same time. I'm just trying to focus on the archaeological ties, and that they are tied to Miyake events based on the methodology that they did with the Despilio tablet.
Right. Andy, you wrote us. Oh, what's that?
I just had a question from Robert. Did they talk about the percentage of time the sun flares this powerfully versus the percentage of time it flares and produces a Miyake event because it's Earth facing? You know what I mean? It has to be Earth facing to produce a Miyake event. So it's producing.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, it's just, I'm sure like these really intense solar flares, if we're actually absorbing them, I would actually agree with you right there that if there was a Miyake event, we probably have to be within the, vicinity of a direct hit, because to absorb that much energy from just, being in the heliopause, that would have to be a seriously, intense solar flare for that. So I do agree with you there.
And yet, when you look up,
I'm just asking, did they talk about that? Did they?
Not that I know of. No, that was just getting to that. As far as I understand, I couldn't get into any of that information. So
I'd be really interested to know if they made any kind of analysis of what the sun's doing.
I think they are trying to address that, but as of right now, there's really not much on it.
Because I mean, if they're looking at cycles, you really need to know when the sun's doing this all the time, not just when
Absolutely.
it's
So
the
that's
earth.
what they're trying. I guess that's what they're trying to discern too. And then with the on
Okay,
the
right.
archaeology
Okay.
side, they're just
But
trying
there's
to.
no tie-in to this to the 11-year or 7-year or these any of these cycles that okay.
Yeah, nothing, not just the regular solar cycles, and I did cover that in my previous video. I think it was Ben Turner in his article where he said they addressed that they say they happen roughly every 1,000 years or so, and they don't know why. And now they're actually saying that they could happen every 600 to 2,400 years, and that actually goes along with my theory because there was three of them within 250 years of each other. So this whole sporadic of when they actually occur and why, no one really has. It's anybody's clue.
Probably something to do with galaxy rotation.
Oh yeah, I mean, because who can
Probably.
actually look at all that information and absorb that and actually tie it together, right?
Well, let me point out something here, that when you look up a Miyake event online, it says that it doesn't say that it comes from the sun. It says it comes from cosmic rays. So if you think
They're not sure
that
yet.
right, and I don't think we are. I don't find that a particularly convincing explanation or even description. But
Right.
when Andy said, does it come from the position of the sun? Well, if my little cannonball here is the sun, does the Miyake event, or does the thing that triggers what we call the Miyake event, come off in a spurt, pew, like that? And if it does, then it would clearly have to come. It would have to be pointed at
Targeted.
the earth. But what if
Yes.
it doesn't?
What it does, if
What,
if
what
I
if it
can
doesn't?
so here's your ball, right? So when it spews, yeah, if it spews out, it comes out in a cloud, right? But I'll turn it this way as it's coming out. As it spews out, it is actually like a fan, and it kind of blows out like that. So because as the
Clearly.
earth, I mean, as the sun is actually rotating too. So as it spews out, it's actually going with the cloud. So it leaves something behind, and it kind of looks like a fan blade.
It kind of follows the Parker current.
Yeah, and they call that. I think they call that the
It's
phi
out of
angle.
there, yes.
Banning it, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So,
Ben, you're
but here-
saying what if it comes out like a radiance?
Exactly. What if the whole sphere goes poof, and it's like a rock hitting. This is still two dimensional. A rock hitting a pond where it goes out in 360 degrees all the way around it.
Well,
Now,
a
that would
lightning arrestor is 9 dinner plates stacked on top of one another, and when too much voltage hits it, somehow it retards the amount of voltage passing through.
You said retard.
Waka, waka, waka. Well, if the sun is filled with double layers coming off of it, isn't that kind of the same thing where these steps could accomplish? So maybe it's giving off extra voltage and the double layers are absorbing it
Okay.
somehow.
Okay, look. And what if one of those double layers went kablam? It would go out in every direction.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it would go
Yeah,
out.
double layers get unstable and they fail sometimes, don't they?
Right.
That's what we think a supernova is. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, we could like compare this, I guess, to how would ordnance specialists actually design the explosion, so they could focus the blast, kind of like that same principle.
Well, if the double layer that Earth and the planets are floating in were to rupture or whatever, seems like that could make a pretty impressive impact on the planets.
Right, but what they do tie the size of the sunspot. If it's going to flare, it's going to that kind of like it dictates the size, the intensity, because of all that energy around the surface area of the sun. There's energy there, so it's going to be effective of the flare. So
what the hell is a sunspot in the electric model? How does Don Scott talk about them?
You're going to hear crickets from me. Put some crickets up.
I just watched Don Scott's presentation on this. Essentially, from what I took from him, it is an absence of tufts.
Okay.
So you have these tufts all together, like, imagine a bouquet of tufts. I only have 2 arms, so this isn't going to work. But if I imagine I had like 50,000 of arms and the tufts are, roiling and boiling and going up, and all of a sudden there's an area where there's no tufts.
Why would there be no tufts?
Our project where the little balls of pink plasma.
Yeah, we see it happening, but
all of a sudden it completely encapsulates the ball, but you still have like some shadowy spots in it still.
Yeah, but what could cause that?
I guess it's just
exactly. Who
power
knows?
level besides over the surface area.
Of the sun. I mean,
Fairy dust.
the sun has this big magnetic field around it, just like the Earth does, and it has magnetic field lines. It has regions of high and low magnetic flux through the ball of the sun, through the spherical capacitor. That's what it is. And so it's penetrating that spherical capacitance, and it's either amplifying or interfering destructively with the normal flow of the sun and causing a cold spot or creating a flare event. So, I mean, this is my interpretation, is that the sun has internal circuits, just like the Earth does, that relate to the whole geomagnetic field, and there's hot and cold spots as a result along the surface.
Right.
And they move around and they develop and come and go because the sun, like the Earth, is a body in process where it's taking in energy and giving out energy constantly. And the mainstream consensus view of both the sun and the Earth is that they're contained, and that all the energy is contained inside and is being released. There's no energy going in. But we know that these stars have to be sustained by energy going in. They can't just be a ball of dynamite that's slowly exploding, or whatever they think, or a ball of nuclear fusion. It's that anyway, you know what I mean. So it's the circuitry, and so what if you have a nova explosion, that's putting everything out 306, or spherically, radially in all directions in a nova type event. But if you have a CME or flare, you're looking at a specific points that are bursting and not the whole planet.
Could that be the difference between a CME and like a Miyake event?
I think a Miyake event is probably just a big CME event.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, because based on the information that they've tied all these Miyake events to, and the witnesses of the ancients saying that they saw it come from the sun.
The sunspots, yeah.
Solar flares. Now,
Although
I take that back.
Still have that kind of problem, but I'm tying these specific events to solar flares because they attached them to the sun through ancient.
But there could be tons of sunspots, and you could still have one of these nova events. What were you saying, Andy?
Oh, I was gonna say it could also be, like something in the galaxy, like supernova or something going on. But I would expect that to affect the sun, and then the sun to affect us, rather than a direct. It's not like a supernova is going to create a direct hit of cosmic rays that would create that kind of event, I don't think.
Right, because it's all connected by filaments, and filaments are what's transferring the energy, and we are further down the load than our star is.
Precisely. So the filaments are going to take it to the sun, and then the sun is going to feed it.
On that note, could sunspots be where filaments connect to the sun and then go out and, like, say, connect to Jupiter and Saturn or something like that?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I don't think that's.
You have incoming energy, and then it's actually being inducted right into the interior, and then induction back out. So
it's all through the top and bottom.
Physical separation, because of induction, I think.
Okay.
Well,
I'm not sure if it is through the top and bottom. I think Don Scott talked about how it's actually at the sun's equator is where the quote unquote Birkeland current connects, and which kind of goes against the little idea of a tube from the North Pole and South Pole. But he said it was from the equator.
Well, no, hold on, Big.
No,
that's where the galactic Birkeland current attaches to the sun.
Yeah.
But that's not where the sun's smaller Birkeland currents necessarily attach, right? It's just the one coming in from the next star over.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure on that. I will take your word for it and look into that more.
Right. Because
That
if you
makes
look at our
sense.
solar system from the top down, you're looking at a cross section of a Birkeland current pinched in.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
you have to look out for what convention he's using when he talks about incoming and outgoing too. Is he talking about positive in or negative in? I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, Birkeland currents send stuff both ways, right?
Because Don Scott says a lot of things that I don't really agree with. I'm sorry.
But that actually brings up an interesting question, Andy. Depending on
He's a
the
very conventional thinker, electrical engineer, if you know what I mean. He's not like wide open to outside of convention, if in my experience. But anyway,
Well,
that doesn't mean
Don,
he's wrong. It just means
I agree, Andy.
don't agree with him.
sure. Now,
I'll be
Andy,
right
Don
back.
says, oh, okay.
Go ahead.
No
And
worries.
say I didn't mean
I was
that.
just going to say, he says that a Birkeland current is a transverse current where it's carrying charge both directions. Would you agree with that?
It's a coaxial current. Yeah.
Coaxial, excuse me. Smooth
Yeah.
brain.
So are you going to submit this as a paper, Robert, to somewhere or what's your
Nope. I just said I'm going to keep the rough draft right where it's at and just send the link out, and then you could just take the idea from there because it's basically copyrighted since I mailed it to myself.
Up on all the tricks I see.
Challenging peer review as much as I can. So as poor boy as I possibly can do this, you're going to see me doing it. So
peer review.
Yep. There is no, like I just told Andy, I mailed this to myself, so it's basically copyrighted material.
Yeah, especially after the Epstein list drops. Jesus, like they were all hanging out on the island, all these mainstream science guys. Like,
yep. So like I was saying, with all the fraud that's going on, especially like Dr. Brian Keating and the way he treated, Dr. Anastasia, I can't remember her last name. I still screw it up. And Dr. Shiloh DeLay from, Demystify Sci. He was so disrespectful to them. He didn't even explain science, really. He just stood behind his own arguments of authority in his own, credentials of studying science for 40 years in academia, which, doesn't appear to me as much because with all the fraud in science, as high as you are in the food chain, you're either A, a fraud yourself, or you're B, complicit. There's no way you're C, completely ignorant.
No, that's not true. I think there are tons of like people that they go through physics and they learn the spooky language and they believe it. And I'm like,
which means you're complicit because you're
complicit, but you might just be a true believer. You might think black holes are real and you're trying to do your part. Like, I don't think.
Well, then if you're a true scientist, you shouldn't be sitting there dismissing people like that, ad hominem attacks, and then just standing behind arguments of authority. You should be able to engage like a scientist.
I'll give you that much in that, like, right now there seems to be a real sorting process going on in society where you're finding out who wants to debate and who wants to call you a name for trying to debate. Yeah. I think that's really, and like that's exactly where the shitbags lay, is the people that are trying to call you a Nazi because you have an opinion or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And it happens in science too. But what blows me away is like how many of these mainstream cosmology guys were going to Epstein Island. I want to run through the files with a search about electric universe, plasma cosmology, run some terms.
I sent you those pictures, right? I did that.
Oh, did you? What'd you come up with?
I went through the Epstein files on the government site. I ran through because I saw on the Q map the term electric sun. So
yeah,
I hit that one up first, right? Guess what popped up?
What?
About 6 or 7 emails on Jeffrey Epstein sending a wire transfer to somebody to purchase electric sunshades for his windows. So, yeah, that's what they call them, electric sunshades.
That's not the smoking gun I was hoping for.
No, so I don't think that has nothing to do. But I even sent that to Jimmy Sims because he and I get into that kind of stuff a lot. So we talk back and forth. And he even thinks that has nothing to do with it. And I was like, I don't think so too. But I just ran it through just so you can see. Nothing. That's what will come up if you run electric sun through the Epstein files.
Did you try plasma cosmology or anything?
Next one, plasma cosmology. Nothing. So then I ran up through because someone told me that the Sapphire project was funded through the Open Source Foundation. So I typed in Dr. Michael Claridge. Nothing. Dr. Montgomery Childs. Nothing. So I don't think that they're completely free and clear. So I'm thinking right now where we stand, plasma cosmology and electric universe has nothing to do with the Epstein list, as far as I know.
Well, they haven't released the other 3 million files yet.
Yeah.
We can still hope.
But so far, we're free and clear without all
Oh,
of
If Walt Thornhill was there, I'm quitting. It's like on Lolita Island.
What was that, Andy?
I've never been.
You never got invited
Good.
to Paradise
I
Island?
never got an invite, no.
Oh,
You weren't even
incredible.
at that place in Arizona, were you?
This is the New Mexico ranch. I was.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
We don't wanna talk about
Zorro Ranch,
Yeah.
where all the bodies are buried.
By the way, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just curious because I haven't actually heard. I don't keep up with this stuff too much. So who's on the Epstein list that's in the science astrophysics? Are there any
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking was there, yeah.
Hawking? Okay.
Yeah, and
As far as I know.
a lot of the heads of universities that are in the science departments.
Not surprised.
There's a lot. I mean, I don't know the names, but
Is there a handy
can-
place this is parsed out, or do you have to
well,
just
you know, like a
stuff it?
lot of influencers will make videos, but no one's doing it about science. But if you go to what is
Yeah.
it, www.epstein.fbi.gov, I think.
Okay.
It brings up the entire archive, and you can just put in search terms and look up stuff.
EpsteinDOJ.gov or something like that.
Something like that. Just do a Google search, you'll find it.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but my God, what's going on in the world, man? People eating babies and stuff.
See, that's like I said, I heard that stuff when I was following Q back. Now that I'm hearing that they're actually saying that this was real, I'm staying as far away from it as I can. I'm enjoying my popcorn because I know it's about to come down. So it's like, I'm just.
I was up on all the Pizzagate stuff that everyone thought was conspiracies. I didn't think it was conspiracies, and man, it sure wasn't conspiracies.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, let's order some.
You know how many
Walk
times
my pizza down here so we can make some jerky. I mean, Jesus.
This is exactly why I left Facebook, because I was commenting on this stuff and all the political stuff, and I got kicked off of Facebook so many times. I was just like, you guys can go yourselves and pound sand straight up your ass. I just said, let that page on the electric geology site just go to pot. I don't care. I'm leaving completely ass peace.
I'll tell you what, man, they buy a lot of bots, so most of the people you're talking to on X and stuff are just bots, but you never know who's who. So
well, a lot of those bots apparently got me suspended a lot, so I was just like, I don't need this place.
I can't imagine you getting suspended from a social media platform for shit posting, Robert. It just boggles the mind.
No, I don't shit post. I back it up. I try to come with receipts, and that's why when I piss people off, it's like, you're offensive, you're fucking mean. I guess so.
Yeah, but there's no such thing as facts anymore.
Straight. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat shit.
When it comes to debating politics, there's no such thing as facts anymore. Because if you're talking to someone on the left, they've got sources that are giving you facts, and if you're talking to someone on the right, they've got facts.
Most of the time,
what I've come to realize is that it's Team Moloch that basically runs both sides.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Meanwhile, back at the Brainstorm.
Radio.
Oh, all right, fine. Are we recording?
Yeah.
We're not recording, are we?
You can enter a few moments later and just cut it all out.
Maybe I won't. You better paint your roof blue, Robert. This conversation got us all on a list.
No, we're good. You know, as like I said, I have faith, so even if they get me, I'll be all right. So
that's a good philosophy. What are you going to do, Ben?
You can strike me down, and I'll come back even far more powerful than ever before.
Like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Here and do science experiments.
There you go. So speaking of science experiments, Andy, you blew my mind with that email you sent to us, just describing the basic timeline of the Proto-Saturn event and how geology. Can you run through that real fast?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at, I guess, is what I'm seeing in the geology is that there was an event that happened where the foundations of the continents were laid, and the mid-ocean ridges were formed, and that event was when the moon was birthed. Okay. And that's the real event that I kind of am focusing on. And I've talked about the traces on Earth that show the passage of the moon and the 2-day orbit and all that stuff. And I'm trying to tie all this together. And so I'm looking back at, well, what on Earth, what evidence on Earth is there of this event? And it looks like this great unconformity, where, like, if you go in the Grand Canyon down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, you see this layer where below, first of all, there's no mammal life, there's only sea life, right? So it looks like the world was just a big ocean maybe at that time, or if there were continents, they weren't, who knows, all right? And and then above that layer, you start having sediments piled up in layers and layers and layers of typical geology. But that unconformity below it is tortured earth that looks to me like that came out and deposited volcanically and formed the cratons. And that ties in with what conventional science says about the cratons. And so, I mean, not the moon part, but that great unconformity is sort of the foundation of the continents. And so if it happened when the moon was born, then I believe that event happened when Saturn micronovaed, and from a brown dwarf and became a planet. And when it did that, it blew
Let there be light.
it blew Venus into its current state. It left it burning, a burning hulk. Mars was protected because it was in line and behind, protected by Venus, but at the same time, it got an EMP shaped by a shaped charge, basically, that skimmed around Venus and then focused on Mars. So Mars got hit with an EMP, and that blew
Like a shock diamond?
and that blew out Valles Marineris, created the volcanoes, and then the EMP blew through Mars, and a portion of it, the remains of it, hit Earth, and that's what blew out the moon. And that also disconnected us from Saturn's orbit, and stuff continued to happen in cycles as the orbits, we had interference between the planets, Venus and Mars in particular, I think. And that created additional events that caused other the cycles of catastrophe.
Sure.
That's interesting because I was
They had to start, I think, with that event where geologically that's marked by the great unconformity. And then you have a pile of sediments that were laid by a plasma storm from that event, and then additional events that laid more layers and more layers. And here you have the dead dinosaurs, and here you have the dead this or that, throughout history, the die-offs that we see.
So, Andy, would it be fair to say that once upon a time, Saturn was out in space as a brown or red dwarf star, and that the Earth and Mars and Venus were orbiting around it as satellites of Saturn inside that plasma sheath? And that when Saturn's heliosphere makes contact with Sol's heliosphere, our sun, that's when it gets captured. Would there be a flare event at that point? And then Saturn would get pulled toward the sun and the planets would line up behind it along the journey toward the sun?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Wall Thornhill's theory is that Saturn came into orbit around the sun, and it would have come in from the polar region and spiraled down and fallen into orbit in the equatorial plane of the sun, along with the other planets. And in the course of that descent and finding its orbit, at some point it would have reached an electrical
Equilibrium.
stress, an electrical stress, because it's coming from outside the heliosphere, coming into the heliosphere, and it's increasing voltage from the sun. The potential difference gets bigger, bigger, bigger until finally something lets go. And that would be the point at which Saturn has flares, not flares, but would have a nova, and then shrink into the remnants would be Saturn, and it would blow the planets out. But yeah, you're right. The planets would be already orbiting Saturn, would be their moon, the Saturn's moons, living inside that plasma ball of the brown dwarf until that happened. And
Right.
You know, that was confirmed, right?
One of the reasons I say this is because in the mythology, they always talk about, dark to light and all these kind of things that are discussed. And just reading between the lines, it sounds to me like they're talking about all of a sudden we had purple skies and Kronos as our god, and then all of a sudden this bright thing appeared, and that's our new god. And
Let there be light.
And then there's a battle that's going on ever since between the believers in Kronos and the believers in solar god, and I think that's a religious battle that we're still seeing the effects of today.
That's what's going on right now. They're Saturn worshippers. They're Saturn worshippers. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's where they kill babies and stuff.
Yeah. So wait, here's another question real fast. This could explain on the Sumerian stones when Marduk enters the solar system to challenge Tiamat, he rises from the waters. If we're coming down from the pole of the sun into the solar system, that would explain why the sun would appear to come up into the solar system to challenge Tiamat.
There you go. I never thought of that, but that's the sort of thing that makes sense, that like reading between the lines, you can find these kind of hints that maybe they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
But then the
question Robert?
is, well, how did they know? Because they couldn't have been, at some point, there are these catastrophic events. Mankind was, if they weren't wiped out, they had to be hiding in a hole somewhere. How did they?
There
had to be survivors
going around.
And that's why I was arguing that the petroglyphs are a testimony of that.
Yeah.
Andy, you're familiar with the petroglyphs in Three Fingers Canyon because you've been there. They're the ones you walk on right as you walk in, right underneath the dragon's throat. Excuse me. That's the one that I was mentioning in my paper and in all the other videos where I suggested twin comets. And also I realized that there's what I'm suggesting in my paper, because I'm going to get back to that, is there's actually like a parallax effect that I'm trying to reference that was possibly during this time of that breakup. Because if you look in the McConkey Ranch petroglyph bend that I love to look at, which is the Fremen style with the red ring, it looks like you're looking up the polar configuration straight up the barrel with a red anode glow with the white plasma sheath in the center. Or we are actually in the pole of Saturn, and the red ring is the actual rings of Saturn through the red filter. But there's a giant red ring around a giant disc, and then like a bullet, bullseye fashion with an arrow in it. So, and then there's two comets on the 8 and 4 o'clock position if it were, reference to a clock.
Well, could those be plasma instabilities?
They could be the
because you see that with the stick man.
It could be the synchrotron radiation ring. Right.
Yeah.
But there's also so many petroglyphs where I see that they are literally look like two comets, because they have long tails, long fingers, and they reference the Navajo hero tribes where there's one larger than the other. One's always one right-handed, the other one's left-handed, which can get into the chirality of the magnetic field, which I was going to touch up on in the paper, because as you get an electrical current, you're going to get that magnetic field working in opposite directions, so you can get basically hand structures that'll be symmetrical or asymmetrical or confronted, anti-confronted.
What was that word you just used? Chi what?
Chirality. So if you're you're looking at the news, right? You see the chiron at the bottom. It's
yeah.
That's the chirality. It's like the motion from left to right, or
okay.
Good word. Right-handed rule, Lorentz force action kind of stuff.
Sure, Andy. on life
please let
before.
me finish.
Oh,
Please let me
okay.
finish. So that's what I wanted to bring up, because when Andy brought up that the panel in his last video, which is called the unexpected panel, where you have that big, large Ant-Man with the two left hands that I always keep mentioning about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, the chirality, because it looks like when you have two left hands, that's completely not symmetrical to art or the human form. But
Right.
that would definitely be indicative of the magnetic field and the chirality in reaction to the comets or whatever those things were. They could be plasmoid, synchrotron, radiation. But since they have tails, I think they actually had matter and substance in their own magnetic fields. And so and they also show two other images of like two sets of comets, because they have circulars with wings, or sun devil kind of imagery, which could be comets just flying away, but they're in pairs. And that's why I keep getting into the twin comet idea, which gets me back to the parallax with the three fingers. Because if you're looking, like, let's just, if I take this right off here, I call it the 6 and the 8 position, right? So we're going to image right here. This is the guy. This is where you're going to be standing in the 6 o'clock position, right?
Okay.
This is the top of a right-handed triangle, right? So as you're looking up the plasma beam, this is based effectively the hypotenuse. Okay.
Camera up a hair.
Oh, sorry. I'm just holding.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Right there. Okay. A little to the left.
There we
Perfect.
Go. Better?
Well, perfect-ish.
I'm trying to do as best I can to hold it in your head as if I shift. Okay. So you're standing here at the point of a base of a right triangle.
Okay.
The plasma sheath is the hypotenuse. This is the top of the triangle, but then imagine where this is a vertical line, imaginary line touching the ground somewhere, right?
Sure.
So, and that would be the center of the clock, right? He's standing in the 6 o'clock position. This is actually the top of the center, right? So you're trying to get a 3D image, okay? Now, this is the 6 o'clock that I talk about in my paper, the parallax. This would be the McConkey Ranch petroglyph Fremen style reference. Now, go to the 3-finger petroglyph image, where it shows what I referenced as the Pictish symbol mirror from the Coman mirror, which is what I suggest as the polar configuration shifted, the three bodies shifted to where you could see overlapping circles looking like a mirror.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it looks like in that petroglyph, but there's also two comets off to the side looking like siding spring.
Yeah.
So as the Earth would have shifted over like a parallax, let's see here if you can see my hands, right? Polar configuration and two comets. As you shift over like this, it almost looks kind of like that, right?
Okay.
Now, if you can see what I'm saying, I can't do it because of the mirror effect.
I think I can see.
Lens, but you see what I'm saying? The petroglyph matches that kind of a parallax effect of when I'm suggesting that's when somebody recorded the polar configuration actually breaking up.
Gotcha. So, Andy, I was thinking about life before the breakup of Proto Saturn. Wouldn't these red dwarf solar systems be the perfect laboratory for life to develop in? I mean, you're kind of shielded from the hostilities of space.
Yeah, I think so. I think Wall has talked about that in the past, that it would really be a good incubator for life to be inside of a brown dwarf.
Yeah, I think that's the solution to the Fermi paradox. Yeah. It's like life appears everywhere, but we never see it because in those conditions, there's really no catalyst for IQ. So everything kind of stays simple.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point because of the brain and how it evolved, and the human brain, it exploded in the frontal cortex seemingly all of a sudden, from we went from apes to people making computers. And so maybe that event was the trigger. Maybe living inside of the mist was, the Garden of Eden or whatever, and it was just too easy to run around naked and eat fruit.
Yeah.
And then after this event, it became tougher. And well, all of a sudden now we have weather to deal with, and climate to deal with, and thunderstorms to deal with, and such
long winters,
plasma storms to deal with. And that all makes sense in the context of mythology if you look back through all the different myths, they all you could read that into any of them pretty much, I think.
Yeah.
And the
And
other
when you
thing
consider,
we always talk
I got a
about
great point to that.
preparation.
That brings up my final point to my paper when it brings up the Miyake event connecting to mythology. Through my research, like I said, I was talking about researching the three-legged crow and the Japanese and the Korean versions, which happened a lot later down the road than the Chinese. I tied that one to the 663, 664 BCE event, which is a Miyake event. And this one, actually, I can have a verification through the carbon-14 spikes, matches the ice core data as well. And there's actually an archaeological confirmation now, because in Japan, they found in the Yayoi wooden pillars in the Osaka area. They were excavated out of Osaka, but they're from the Yayoi region. But they were so large that they had a tree ring span of about 700 years, right? So when these rings were repurposed, they found that the 660 event was right inside this range. So it matches. They actually matched the 660 event now, but they haven't declared it. So that's why I'm going to take this event now and use, by the same method they did with the Despilio event, attach the Yayoi pillars for the Yatagarasu event in Japan for the 660 event in honor of them, because just last week from today, February 11th, is the anniversary of the Yatagarasu anniversary. That's when they observe that holiday. So out of respect for that holiday, that history, and for Dr. Fusa Miyake, I'm going to take the time to name this Miyake event the Yatagarasu Miyake event of 663, 664 BCE.
Cool.
That is pretty cool.
And that's kind of like the culmination of my paper, is to attach all those events: the Yatagarasu event that I just named, the 52, 59 BCE event, which they use as a global anchor to the Despilio tablet, and then the future confirmation that I offer a predictable confirmation with the amphoras from the Yangshao culture in China. And then I offered, I believe that, Andy's work with the end of the Younger Dryas with the 12,350 BCE event. And that you can use back up with the Wandjina petroglyphs of Australia, because they can date those back to right around the end of the Younger Dryas, and even back to, they say, to where the Lachamp event was. So I suggested to him that information, where he could take that and use that kind of information, especially the Lachamp event, because where the magnetic field becomes so weakened, that could actually, when the atmosphere was coupled, that could apply for all those plasma winds and electric fields moving things, and basically moving mountain ranges, like they say with mountain ranges, would dance across the horizon.
Yeah, it must have been wild.
And lakes boiling shit, because all that energy would be coming in through the fault lines, aquifers, all that stuff, and creating all heat. So you'd actually get the rivers boiling, oceans boiling through those paths of least resistance.
Yeah. Hey, did you guys hear about the amino acids and stuff they found on the comet? It wasn't 3IA Atlas, but there was another comet. They found all these building blocks for life, and then I guess 3IA Atlas had the same kind of materials on it too. It crosses our path, and now the Earth has gone through its trail. And I just saw a thing about strange new fungus being documented.
Yep.
That it's like those tall fungus you used to see in the age of the dinosaurs, where they look like elephant tusks almost.
Those brand new structures.
Now those are cropping up. One wonders if we got some kind of strange DNA from running through the comet trail that assembled in Earth. Because
that's what they say happens. I mean, according to
Michael Claridge talking about the light of life, where when you take the building blocks of DNA and you vibrate them at the Earth's frequency, they will form into shapes.
It's funny you say that, because you mentioned the Earth's frequency, because I think with the Artemis program and the satellites that they're trying to launch over to Mars, I think they have a program where they're trying to grow like human tissue for like organ transplant, medical emergencies and stuff for the crew. So as they're growing these tissues and everything, they were like trying to like grow like livers and stuff, or whatnot. But as they're growing these certain tissues, they observed that at the International Space Station, where they're growing these things, that the tissues are growing what were called organoids. It's like the stuff that wasn't supposed to be there. And I was, when I spoke with Ben, I was thinking immediately, fair weather effect, the voltage per meter, you're all the way out in space and you're getting that electric field is completely not what the babies and down here and all our tissues are receiving. So you're going to get some weird biology going on and they're like, we don't know what's going on. So I was thinking,
hold on, Robert, me and Ben talked about this
there, but I'm going to take off my tinfoil hat right now. I said, maybe there's a correlation there.
Yeah, me and Ben were talking about this. So his theory about magnetic, about the steelies, he paints them black and white so that the black is negative and the light is positive. And he sticks them together. And what do you find? You get these islands of charge where there might be 3 positives sticking out here, but only 1 down here. Now, if you throw all these things together in a big sandbox and you vibrate them, let's say the vibration is too strong. Well, nothing's going to stick together. Every time any 2 magnetic parts touch, they're going to get knocked apart. So then you lower the vibration, so it's not enough. Now the weak parts might stick, but because they're weak, other parts are bumping into them, but they're not knocking them off, and those weak parts stay, and they begin to form improper shapes. But if you dump those molecules into the Earth, where they're vibrating at the Earth's vibration, it's just enough so that the weak parts get knocked off, but the strong connections stay. That's why you get the forms that are supposed to grow. But when you get out into space and now the vibration is dropped off and you're not getting those weak points knocked off, you start forming abnormal shapes. When we live in our houses, we're covered in insulation. We're not connected to the Earth's field. Instead, we're vibrating with our phones. Maybe that's why we're forming cancer, because the weak connections are staying and they're not getting knocked off because we're not vibrating at the proper vibration of the Earth. Maybe this is why grounding helps you from getting cancer and things like that.
I just bought myself some bowling shoes with some leather soles. They just came in the mail today, and I'm rocking them because they're rentals.
Oh, fantastic! Let me know if you die of cancer.
Let's find out. But I always wanted to have myself a set of bowling shoes because rental. That's some really cool brand recognition right there.
Yeah, leather is grounded, right?
Yeah, but they have leather soles, so I can ground. But then they're so funky because they're rental bowling shoes, and I'm just at that point where I'm a disabled veteran. I don't care anymore. I can be a little eclectic.
Yeah.
It's good for my mental health.
Yeah, but that makes me wonder. So we've got this plasmoid at the core, and so we've got all these ions from the Birkeland current coming in. We've got the Earth spinning because it's spinning with the plasma that's spinning through it, right, along this Birkeland current. All these molecules are coming in off the sun, or ions coming off the sun, where it's vibrating too energetically for them to connect together. They're getting knocked apart. They enter the Earth, where things cool down. They start vibrating with the Earth. They form molecules, and then they're shot out by either reverse gravity because double layers flip the polarity, or because centrifugal force. I don't know. And they start making their way to the surface along filaments, and they start vibrating up these filaments and forming plants and matter and all the things that we see. Is that nuts?
No, because I noticed you said something like a shift in polarity, and I kind of wanted to bring this up to Andy because he was in Arizona, and also Ben, because we were talking about this in the Twin Comet video. If you remember what you called the boned fish petroglyph in Arizona, it's also called the Kayenta glyph from Peratt's paper.
Yeah,
it looks like the ant figure with the big, goggle eyes, and then it has it's the one that he actually explains on the T-shirts and everything. If you buy from Stickman on Stone, where it has the Google eyes, he calls it the plasmoid Taurus.
Sure, I know the one.
Right, and it looks like an upside down fish with the 2 pronged legs at the top. Well, I suggested that same image is inverted in the head of Sinbad image, right? And then it actually grew out plasma arms that reached out and grabbed and choked the comets, which looked like Donati's comet. It's that inversion of the polarity is what I wanted to get to, because in Arizona, the petroglyph is observed as this way, but it's inverted in Utah.
Oh, yeah.
The AI conversation, they said in order for that to happen, that would probably be significant of a polarity shift electromagnetically. Thoughts?
Well, if the Earth is a spherical capacitor, and we have to imagine the Z pinch is down toward the center where there's some sort of plasmoid,
Right.
it would seem that each shell off of that would flip polarity, wouldn't it?
Right, but then Andy was just suggesting that whatever was being pushed out, was it positive to negative, or was it negative to positive, or was it actually observed, or was actually a observance of a flip, or two different events, and they had the same event, but the polarity was different. These are all different, brand new questions that we can ask based on the position that we find in these petroglyphs and
Sure.
pictographs in now.
So
If we actually apply electromagnetic principles. If we can find the same image somewhere else on the planet, but completely upside down from it, would that be indicative of a polarity shift?
Uh-huh.
well, what happens is, and if you look at the sun and the solar prominences, the big arcing coronal currents,
Yeah.
coronal loops is what I call them.
Right.
Out of the sun. If you watch and study some slow motion film of those, you will see bolides traveling through the arc, and they'll reverse direction and go back the other way.
Yes.
And so that's what's happening, is a reverse in polarity. And that's because that arch is actually a ring current. It's connected underneath the surface,
Right.
well as above, right? And so what's going on underneath the surface is affecting this flow of current up here. And the whole thing acts, I believe, in terms of circuitry, like an op amp. And an op amp will do that. So anyway, that's what I think is going on.
Right, and that's part of my theory with the Miyake event and how it formed Upheaval Dome, was when that intense surge shockwave hit the Earth, it compressed the magnetic field to where just that one ring current that you have, which was identified as the L shell for the Earth, absorbed the complete coupling of that shockwave, or the CME. So therefore, it actually was able to send a current down into the telluric currents, and that's what caused all that rain of shower to come down. So the upstrike was actually Upheaval Dome, or it was a downstrike, but that's where I suggested it actually came up out of the ground. Or it could have just funneled, like Jacob Gable's experiment, where it was just a pillar of fire creating the crater. But whatever rained down on the surface of that player from that ring current coupling, like in the NASA image, it just scarred the entire Southwest United States.
Here's a weird question. If we had a scope that could see dark mode plasma, and we were able to zoom out from the Earth and look at the Earth, do you think the Earth might look kind of like the sun, with all these filaments and stuff roiling all over its surface?
Well, Andy suggested in, what was it, 2017, in your speak, that you actually said that the Earth has like those anode tufts and coronal loops, just like the sun. It's just they're in a darker mode.
Yeah, they'd be in dark mode, but what would their position on the Earth be, Andy? Where would the tufts be?
I'm sorry.
So
Where?
if, let's say you're able to see the dark mode plasma on the sun, like let's say you could snap a finger and it all went into glow mode.
On the sun.
No,
On the
on
Earth.
the Earth. On the
On the
Earth. Would the Earth
Let me tell you
resemble?
where they are on the Earth. They're cumulus clouds. That's what they are.
I was just thinking they would be the storm cells. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the mesocyclones and hurricanes.
So in
That
the
is-
Earth,
Handbags of the gods is, right, Andy?
What's
so-
that?
That's what you say the handbag of the gods is, or those cyclones and the ring currents that would feed through
rain
them.
current, the storm cloud.
The atmosphere is part of the capacitor, right? The
I
Earth's spherical capacitor, and the atmosphere is the most active layer in that capacitor. And so that's what you see going on. That's where the tufting is the cumulus cloud buildup that builds up into a mesocyclone.
So
And
if clouds,
look at it, look at satellites and watch the buildup of it. It looks like a tuft. I mean, it actually does. I mean, circuit wise, that's what's happening. It's not exactly the same thing as the sun, because you're looking at a weak plasma that's not really technically a plasma. What it is a bound current that's acting as a plasma, because the water is acting as a bound current. It's the charge carrier, but it's not a plasma by definition, because it's not. You've got charge carriers in the water molecule, because they're dipolar, and they'll acquire charge and act like an ion, but they're not ions and electrons, they're molecules. So it's a
Right.
molecular current, if you will, And that's a new term I just made up.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be the guy to do it.
A bound current is the technical name for it. A bound current. It's a real thing, and it's been studied, but not very much. But that's what also happens when you have a dusty plasma. And the dusty plasma, all that matter in the dust in the plasma also becomes charge carriers. And then that's why you get sorting and you get the layers of sorting of material, because it's all charged, getting charged and responding to the electric field and sorting itself out by step
Right.
within the current.
So if our cumulus clouds are water vapor basically facilitating charge running along electric currents, then you could say the anode tufting in the sun would be ions that are stuck to electric current? Arc mode ions?
Well, in the sun, you have a pure plasma, or nearly, so it's everything's excited, everything's energized and ionic and free electrons, and very little, matter to pick up a charge. But that's a big difference in just the strength of the charge carrying between what I'm talking about, a molecular charge, and a true plasma charge.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or did I answer your question?
There's something in there that the energy is flowing through, right? There is like the sun is producing ions. And what is an ion? It's like a decoupled molecule, right?
Yes, the electron's been shaken free either by energization or they say
Right.
heat.
So when I was talking about bin steelies, where the north is white and the black is negative, positive, negative, and you can see it, this is where these are broken apart. They're not connected. You don't have a positive, negative. It's all just the component parts, and they won't reconnect until they're vibrating at a rate where the magnetic positions can hold. Would that be accurate?
I
Well,
don't
yes,
know. I don't
Andy.
know the thing the black and white thing you're talking about.
I think Ben's grabbing it now. So
I'm
he
trying to grab it right now.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Where the hell
show
did they
him what
go?
we mean. Because to me, this is mind-blowing stuff, but I don't know if it's accurate or not, but
They're usually sitting right here. It looks like my lab gremlins have. Oh no, they're right here. They're right here. I got them. I was gonna say, I know they're usually right here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
So
those are awesome.
they're just round magnets that I have colored with the polarization. So blue is North Pole, red South Pole. Actually, it doesn't
And you
matter.
match those to the that filter that you can see the magnetic field lines on with, right?
You can.
yeah, they're colored
Yeah,
so you can
absolutely.
tell
That's how
what
you
the
match
polarity of them
you
is.
actually match the fields themselves or the polarity.
Yeah.
But
You
Andy,
didn't just arbitrarily paint colors on there, did you?
what Matt is talking about is demonstrated like right here. You've got 3 of these together, and as you can see, you've got 2 south poles and 1 positive and 1 north pole right there. Well, what's felt right in between there, in that little gap, in that little valley? I'm not sure. Let's put it in there and see. Well, it actually
You're talking about the call gap.
Yeah, it's creating a whole another gap. Now I realize that quantum particles or fundamental particles aren't particles and whatnot, and they're not magnetic, or they're not magnets either. They're one field. They're either positive or negative. So if you imagine these 3 as protons, you got proton, proton, proton. Well, what's holding them together? Well, according to Ito Call, you've got to have an electron right there in the middle in that valley. Well, so what this space right here where my finger is, what's felt right here? What is right here? Well, that's going to be a little bit of a negative, the electrons field that can be felt right there. It's not here because this proton's definitely attracted to it. This proton's definitely attracted to it. This proton's attracted to it. So you've got 3 positive fields and an island of negative charge right between the 3 protons. And so the question is when you look at it macroscopically, you're like, wait a minute, why doesn't this negative charge just immediately cancel out with the positive charges. Well, that's why. That's why. Because they're already all together. Maybe.
And on
Maybe.
some parts, there's more positive than negative. So if you take another little clump and you bump it off of it, it will be more likely to stick where there's more connection point.
Right. You can get like an instability. It can have wiggle room, or it can
and if it's vibrating too much, they're never going to stick, because like when they're coming off the sun, they're vibrating too hot. They're bouncing off each other no matter what part hits. But in the earth, where it's vibrating just right, the strong islands of charge will connect and they'll form the shapes they're supposed to form. But if the weak parts connect, they won't be held on strong enough. Another one will bump into it and knock it off. That's why things form in the shape they're supposed to form in. And until you fuck it up by being insulated and carrying your phone everywhere.
Right.
I never carry my phone.
That's why you're smarter than everybody.
Yeah.
That's why nobody can reach.
Exactly. That's also why you're smarter than everybody.
The other benefit.
So anyway, well, yeah, that was fun. Anybody else want to talk about anything else?
Just one more thing. Whenever Andy was talking about the Mars and Venus being birthed out, I would love to share some information with you, because I was looking into that kind of thing, where I was looking into the plasma sheath and births. So I looked into petroglyphs where they have birth images. I've got Master of Animal.
Yeah. What'd you come up with?
Where they have the birth imagery on that. And also I got into the idea, because a lot of this similar imagery, especially with the head of Sinbad petroglyph, or the pictograph there that usually see on Thunderbolts videos a lot. But there's that tall figure with the antlers, or on the head, and has like a spiral image in the stomach. Well, that spiral is what convinced me that's kind of whenever Venus and Mars shot out, like the Mississippian twins from the raccoon face horned serpent. I also looked into the possibility. Now, this is what I'd like to share with you, Andy. The possibility of the idea of the shaman imagery, with like the dancing hair and all the drums and the drumstick, which could be the serpent from that petroglyph, and the jester with the Marat, because he has the both of these characters throughout history are highly tied to the spirit world, and can address people in weird ways to reveal truth. However, shamans did it through like a spiritual way. Jesters did it through comedy and embarrassment. But they both carried the same kind of stick, a staff with a head on it, and sometimes it was 3 heads. So that gets back to that 3-body issue with mythology and everything. So I would just love to send some of that information with you and see if it kind of would correlate, or if it's just total bullshit and you can just throw it away. But if you're interested, I'd love to share it with you.
I'd really like to see it. You mentioned something earlier that I was going to ask you about, because you talked about the alignment of the planets and how you saw this one panel or something that depicted something with the planets out of alignment and the parallax.
The parallax? Yeah.
Parallax. I'd love to see that, because I want to see what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So you'll once I send you the pictures of the petroglyph, you'll know exactly what, because you'll know I've been there. I just stood on that thing. So yeah. And then the Conky Ranch is just right up here in Vernal, and Ben and I have been there, and this is my favorite place to go to, specifically for that one glyph, because it's a Fremen style. So it's got pigment and it's been chiseled, so it's a hybrid. And it looks exactly like it's got a polar configuration, twin comets, plasma sheath, and a sheath coming down, and like according to what Talbot and Barroso said, an arrow piercing the hearts of the confronted power, or the gathered powers. So it's like a beautiful glyph that I just love staring at. But then I matched it with the 1 and 3 fingers with the comb and mirror idea. It does look like there's a parallax, because it does have 2 comets. And then if you were actually on the planet Earth and the comets were closer, like the ones that I suggested in my theory, because they're twins that can actually appear like they come within great proximity to Earth. And actually, that's what they did in 2016. That's how we observed them. They came really close at the same time. And but that imagery is, since they'd be closer, if you were to pivot, they would have a greater angle of spin than what was further away. So that kind of accounts for why the comets are now shifted from the center point to where they're almost like that, and then the comb and mirror is like over here. You know.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm sorry, I keep going backwards because my camera's not mirrored, so it looks completely disheveled on the camera. But once
We
I
got
show
it.
the
It
imagery,
looks like you're doing kung fu, honestly.
yeah, it does. And I'm trying to like
five animals
match
kung fu.
so you see what I'm doing, but
Yeah,
when
well,
I'm
I'll wait
looking
for the
at stuff and
pictures.
I'm trying to match it turns into a cluster. So I apologize for that. But once
I'll
I
put
send
the
you
picture up,
you'll see
and
what
I'll
I'm
add the
talking
kung fu sound effects.
right? So, but yeah, once you get the images, I'll send you there. You'll see what I'm talking about, Andy.
Sounds
Sure.
good.
Cool.
And I also hope that the Miyake event evidence helps you with your forensic evidence, because with your Eye of the Storm series, that's some heavy duty shit to be running over the surface of the planet. So that there was definitely the idea of an energy mechanism or what could deliver that. That's why I wanted to help you out with that. Maybe it'll help. Who knows? Because the timing.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the one at the Younger Dryas. I mean, I think that's a real find, and that's
Right.
that's pretty interesting.
Right. And
I'm
when I did
interested
that,
in other ones too, and I just don't know enough, and I need to find
that's why I
out,
wanted to
because
send
if
it
you
your way.
have a
Yeah.
whole bunch of information about events or reports or artwork that displays something or whatever from those different periods that correlate, that would be really interesting just to put it together and as a
Right.
synopsis of information.
But that's
Anyway,
kind of what I got from that discussion with the AR, was the reference to the Wangina, because they say that's like one of the cultures that actually did go back that far in time that would have a record, and they do have glyphs that are really aberrant to what we see in normal life, and it
yeah,
matches up with that time. So that's why I suggested throw it your way. Especially it was so serendipitous that the timing just fell right into place. Your video came out right as I was doing an AI conversation. It just pointed it out.
those things happen all the time.
They do.
Synchronicities. Yeah.
Yep, and I think it would be a sin not to even share it with you, because it was like the cosmos presenting the opportunity to not share it, and like a disservice to everybody.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That was fun.
Okay, guys.
That was really cool.
So thank you,
Thanks
Andy,
for the convo.
I'm really grateful for having you on. Oh, and one more thing, since since the other two videos we tried to do got squashed, for the fans, right? There is an error in my paper. And I kind of rode Andy really hard on this, because if they were familiar with the Thunderbolts video where he mentioned my name on a little rock sample that I sent him, I really was excited to get my name put into a video, so I wrote him really hard to give me credit. And then I turned around and screwed him over inadvertently by not putting his blog site listed properly in my paper. I have made an error by listing his blog site as thedailyplasma.org. It is thedailyplasma.blog. And I am so sorry, Andy, for doing that.
No worries. I don't, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't really use that website. I'm not trying to draw people to it. It's just handy for me to write on it and then use that
That's cool
for publishing. But I would rather people go to Thunderbolts and see my stuff there, and that way they see everybody else's stuff too. And
and that's why I couldn't really send this to Thunderbolts, because since it does involve the twin comets, I think it was back in 2022 where I offered the idea to Stuart of this whole theory with the twin comet, but he didn't get back to me for a while, so I just assumed that they weren't interested. And then I got with Buddy James, because he was trying to have his convention at that time, so I offered it to him and he accepted. And then after that, Stuart got back to me and says, "Oh yeah, we're interested." I was like, "Well, I just promised it to somebody else now, but I have an idea. I had another idea I was working on with the Tafoni and the rock varnish." However, I told him after a while I couldn't really develop anything, because everything that I would need was basically Andy Hall's work, because it revolves around on the plasma winds and everything shaping the terrain of the surface.
That's all right.
That's why I wanted to hand that off to you. I was like, I really couldn't do anything with that work without basically making a video that Andy Hall would do with my voice on it. So basically, if you wanted to look into the Tafoni idea and rock varnish, because that's like actually a physical or a forensic evidence of what your stuff would do, based on the idea of sapphire having manganese show up in their environment, the atmosphere, when it wasn't there originally. Could have actually bonded with our oxygen, making a manganese oxide and plating onto the surface, which is exactly what rock varnish is. And then phony if you match up with like plasma etching on surfaces, metals, all that stuff. It's exactly like that pocked honeycomb differential erosion that you see that you don't normally get from water or wind. It looks really like weird if you stare at it. And but that's exactly what happens when you do plasma sputtering on surface through anisotropic or isotropic sputtering, because it's how it erodes. It's either through a tube or a bowl, So it leaves a dish-based effect. So I just basically was handing that off to you because I know you could basically take those ideas and articulate it far better than I could, especially with your Eye of the Storm series already having all that information. You can just add that to it if you like.
Well, you're always free to use my information. I don't mind at all. I want people to do that and spread the word, because I don't like to sit down and write a whole lot anymore.
Neither do I. That's why I was like, but you do it so well, and I was like, I'm trying to get away from this because it really stresses me out, and with PTSD, it doesn't do well.
Me too.
I wanted to like wrap this up. This is my magnum opus, and then I was just like, those last two ideas seems like it's right up Andy's alley, so I would have just hand it off and just watch videos from here. Let somebody else take over.
Yeah, well, me too. I'd like to just hand stuff over to a production team and have them make movies out of this stuff, because it's all visual.
Great,
Need the visual aspect. So,
all righty. Okay, guys, let's wrap it up. I'm out of time.
All right, take care, gentlemen.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a good day.
Take care.
Too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn. Hope you learned something new or found some food for thought. If you did, take a second to smash that like and subscribe button. Consider joining our Patreon to help Sparks and I spread the word. And then join us next time as we explore this amazing electric universe. Cheers!